going to talk about. And we're going to do it by going back 4 years when there was another time of crazy upheaval and change known as COVID, which is kind of the origin story of helium and hotspotting. It all took place here in Lisbon. Helium, technically no, but the story I'm going to tell did. And how that's related to the beginning of DePIN. So, is that, yes. Okay, so quickly something about myself. So I used to work in traditional infrastructure, like critical infrastructure. So I worked in a very strange area where I would go to big companies that had issues, often security issues, internal collusion, kind of sensitive things, and I would try to resolve them, usually with technology, like electronic security and different types of softwares. I worked a lot with big telcos around the world and the real estate companies who own telecom infrastructure. And it was a privileged position because I was able to talk to the senior executives about a lot of their like sensitive problems that they don't normally publicly talk about. And by doing so, you learned a lot about their operations, their organization. And what I realized was with these massive multi-billion-dollar, supposedly extremely forward-thinking tech-savvy companies, there's actually massive inefficiency, wasted costs. They move very slowly. There's a lot of things they're not really thinking about, right? So I would essentially sell multi-million-dollar lock and key solutions to move away from this to something more sophisticated and electronic, to simply stop a cell site from going down because somebody can't open the door because they've lost the key, and then you lose coverage in an entire area, and then you get fined like $25,000 a day by the regulator. That's what I was doing, right? So working with all these big corporates like Vodafone. So around that time, there was this new thing that was appearing in the world. It really started in 2013, but it became the way it's known today, incorporating blockchain around 2019. So this company is known as Helium. How many people here have heard of Helium? Okay, so the majority. Good, okay. So don't need to go too deep into Helium. Meanwhile, in Lisbon, there was some savvy, forward-thinking cats who are in this room right now, Maxime Goosens, who was giving me this look like, don't you dare make me stand up. And Daniel Andrade, who's over here, he likes to talk. He has a podcast. Who are the founders of Hotspotty, so the company I work for, who were very forward-thinking and were seeing this new trend rising in the US out of Silicon Valley. So it was started by Sean Fanning, so he was one of the original founders of Napster, and Sean Carey, who's actually an advisor to Hotspotty, who's the CTO, and another guy, Amir Halim, who is the current CEO of Helium. This was really a US trend, but they were starting to expand into Europe, and Daniel and Max were some of the first people that actually brought it into Europe, starting with Lisbon, and then moving to the Netherlands and Belgium as well. So during the time of COVID, when everyone was locked inside, they were basically sneaking around like hooligans, climbing on people's roofs, installing these antennas. And so why? Like, what's the point of these antennas? Well, essentially, it's like a Bitcoin miner. But what does a Bitcoin miner do? Like these ASIC miners? Well, it just uses a bunch of electricity to run an algorithm so you can mine Bitcoin. It doesn't really do anything, right? The difference with Helium is they flipped it on its head and they were saying, what if the thing that mined a token could also produce something meaningful? And if you put them all together as a network, it could create a massive service that you could actually sell, build a business out of, and then the token itself would be backed by real world value and actual revenue that could allow the entire thing to sustain itself. So they used this model to build an IoT network, which is the Internet of Things. And in 3 years, they were able to span 1 million nodes, so 1 million access points across the entire Earth. So China, Brazil, the Middle East, the US, doesn't matter, which is the fastest rollout of a telecom network in history. And they were able to do so for about 5 to 10% of the cost, which was primarily just marketing and some software development, and about arguably 3 to 5x faster than it had ever been done before. So regardless what you think about Helium, because the current price of their token is not so high, what they did was they proved a model. Essentially the ability to bootstrap a network. So flipping the entire thing on its head. So these guys that I used to work with would raise billions and billions of dollars, usually of debt. They would then hire contractors like Nokia or Ericsson who would supply the tech, who would then subcontract all of the installation and maintenance, tens of thousands of people, who would go across the entire country over the course of 5 to 7 years, climbing mountains, rooftops, everything else, to install this very expensive equipment that then had to be maintained, and then was not useful until the telcos went to buy spectrum. in an auction, usually from the government, for hundreds of millions of dollars as well. So then they can make new SIM cards, create new plans, spend hundreds of millions marketing these plans to try to recoup a bit of that investment with a higher price plan so they can make enough money that maybe it shows that they have a bit more value, a bit more profit, their stock price goes up. So they can then do it all again. And they normally would actually take their entire infrastructure, sell it for billions of dollars, then lease back the space from a real estate company who now owns the actual land and the tower, to then use that money to then buy the tech for 4G or 5G. So it's just money being passed around very, very slowly, usually over the course of anywhere from 7 to 10 years. So you have the 3G wave, and you have the 4G wave, and you have the 5G wave. And it makes you think, wasn't there a better way? And that's where Helium came in. And they said, yeah, we can do this in 3 years, and we'll do it for 5% of the cost. Why? Because we pay nothing. Everyone else is going to pay for it. Why? Because they're going to mine tokens. And people like Daniel and Max can attest that there was a time when one little hotspot, which looks like this, which you could basically connect to a router in your house. It's not so hard. I mean, ideally it's on a roof and it's insulated, etc. But one of these things could sometimes generate thousands of dollars a day. So you can imagine if you had a network of thousands of these, generating thousands of dollars in a day, people were becoming millionaires in the course of 6 months off of Helium, right? And that's what allowed them to scale. So just to reiterate, so now they have a deal with Telefonica, they're expanding into Mexico, they've introduced global roaming, so in Europe it's still IoT, in the US they actually have 5G services, and it's very likely that that will be coming to Europe as well, so something to look out for. However, to achieve this is not easy. How do you train people? How do you find the hardware? How do you manage the installations themselves? How do you know if it's online, if it's offline? You need to find hosts, people to actually put it up. That's how Daniel and Max found me. I was one of their early hosts, and I had a radio in my house in Grassa. Then what do you pay the hosts? Do you pay them cash? Do you pay them a percentage split of the token? How do you manage that? What about taxes? So this was the origin of Hotspot. Essentially, they built a CRM/ERP system that eventually over 40% of the global hotspots, so we're talking like 400,000 hotspots, were all managed under this software. And that allowed them to scale from just like touching the lives of maybe 150 different individuals or families by the installations that they did, because they did about 150, to over 300,000 people by building the software that allowed everyone in the world to do the same thing. So that was kind of the origins of Hotspot. So it went from, orders of magnitude, right? 100 to basically 300,000. And now our goal is to make that like 300 million with a new platform that we call DePIN Hub. But before we get there, it's important to understand this growth between Helium as kind of a experimental project to DePIN as an entire ecosystem. So essentially, while Helium was doing its thing, there was a few other projects as well, like Filecoin. People kind of looked at this and they thought, wow, why couldn't you do this with weather stations? Could you do this with vehicle telematics, GPS networks, water, solar panels? You think about it, like where do you need lots of infrastructure or devices that are normally hard to install, expensive to maintain? Why can't you use token incentives to motivate people to do it for you, essentially for free, by basically ensuring in some way that this network will generate a meaningful service that you can charge actual revenue for, that will then flow back into the value of the token and allow these people to eventually make a whole lot of money on their hardware investments, right? So that was the origin of what is now called DePIN, Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Networks, right? So essentially it's people-powered networks, community-owned networks, right? They leverage blockchain and token incentives to basically coordinate the actions of hundreds of thousands or millions of people in unison to actually create a meaningful service. This is what's very interesting. Masari, which is sort of like Bloomberg of Web3, has predicted that this will be valued at $10 trillion. The TAM is $10 trillion by 2030. So it's a massive opportunity. And if you look in this current cycle, this is the top 10, I believe, DePIN projects. This is how they've been doing. I mean, this was a few weeks ago. This is Bitcoin and the Bitwise 10 index. So it's kind of like your traditional, more like DeFi focused token. So you can see the gap. These are some of the top DePIN projects. And what's important is everything is up and to the right, which normally, unless you're shorting, is what you want. This just gives you a value of the addressable market of some of the different industries. And what's interesting is it's fairly cycle resistant. Because the idea is when you have a meaningful service, it doesn't matter if the token, what's happening in the crypto market, people still need their phones. People still need energy. People still need water. People still need to use their vehicles. And if you're building a service around those things, it's not going to matter what the crypto markets are doing. So this is a map we put together. Thank you, Daniel, which gives you a little bit of an overview of DePIN. I'm not going to go into it right now because we don't have that much time, but there's a lot of different divisions. You can essentially break it down between digital, somewhat intangible resources. So these can be things like actually what we're doing right here, which is real-time communication network. So this is Streamr basically builds like BitTorrent, but for real-time data. So this is obviously a soft service, right? But it's built on top of DePIN Rails. You have GPU compute resources where you can basically take underutilized GPUs like you're a gamer. And then while you're gaming, or just while the thing's sitting there idle, you can actually use it for AI inference model development, right? Or to power cloud gaming use cases. On the other side is more typical like Helium style traditional infrastructure where you actually have a physical device that's often location dependent that does something more tangible that you can kind of see or touch in the real world. So that's kind of how you break it down. There's now hundreds of projects spanning both sides. They're both very different in how they're implemented, but it's all considered DePIN. And POKT Network would be another example. It's sort of in between the two worlds, actually, a little bit. But we'll let Adrian talk about what is POKT Network soon. These are some other noteworthy examples. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but really quickly, because they are cool. For example, Hive Mapper. What a lot of people don't realize is when you have these Google Maps, you have these cars that drive around that cost $500,000 to $1 million. It's not very safe to be driving these in certain parts of the world. Often roads are only actually driven around and mapped like once in every couple of years. So you end up with this really bad street view data. Hive Mapper is just putting these dash cams on anyone's Uber or anyone's vehicle, getting super fresh map data every single day because they're incentivizing them with their honey token to do so. So you end up with a map that's way more up to date than your typical Google map. Aether is the GPU compute that I was just talking about. So basically, they come from Tencent and Riot Games. They know all about cloud computing and cloud gaming. And what they realize is that you don't have to be Amazon, AWS, like controlling your own data centers with all of your like NVIDIA H100 GPUs. You can actually just crowdsource it. I mean, Aether is actually slightly different because they actually do buy spare GPUs in data centers. But there's other projects similar to them that literally just use anybody's computer, anybody's GPU to create a massive decentralized network of compute resources that can then be used to power cloud gaming and AI development and actually compete with Amazon and Microsoft, OpenAI and all of these companies. So it's quite interesting. So that brings us to DePIN Hub. So now that there's hundreds of DePIN projects, the space is growing. Our experience deploying Helium, but also building software to scale it across the world, knowing a lot of investors, media companies, et cetera, having blockchain experience, having software development experience, et cetera, we decided that the right position for us is to try to help grow the entire space as a whole. So we created DePIN Hub as sort of a central resource where you can discover projects, you can buy the equipment, buy the miners, we help out with the shipping and the fulfillment. We also help actually launch new projects as well. So there's also kind of an accelerator mechanism. The idea is to create a virtuous cycle, basically kick off a flywheel that allows the entire ecosystem to grow and all of these projects to increase in value, to have better and better services, to bring in more and more real world money, like actual revenue, to allow the token price to go up so normal people that are getting involved are rewarded for their time and their investment. So just a quick overview of what we do. So we have a media arm. We have a podcast. So Daniel over there runs his own podcast, which has now become probably the most popular podcast in DePIN, interviewing founders, VCs, thought leaders, etc. We have DePIN's largest newsletter, at least unproject affiliated, so like objective newsletter, 230,000 subscribers globally for our newsletter. We do a lot of speaking engagements. We have a lot of educational content. We do giveaways and other things to basically help promote and grow the space as a whole. Now, beyond that, we've recently launched, about 6 months ago, a website called DePINHub.io. And the goal there is to basically be the only tab you actually need to keep open if you're interested in this space. You can find all the new projects. You can find social metrics, so even if they don't have a token yet, you can see like what's trending. Are they growing on Discord? Are they growing on Twitter? Gives you a bit of alpha, so you can see like if they are about to release a token, maybe this is a hot project and I should get in early. We take news using different AI integrations, so we can pull stuff from Discord, from Twitter, from blogs, from PR announcements. You can basically find all the recent news. Basically, everything you need to discover and monitor the space. Now, what are we doing now, and what are we excited about now, and what are we fundraising for now? So if anybody is an investor out here, what we're currently doing is we're about to launch the world's first and only truly DePIN-focused launchpad. So a launchpad is basically like a platform to do ICOs, it's a platform to grow projects, but in DePIN it's a bit different than traditional crypto because it's not just a token. You also potentially have hardware, you have to deal with supply chain issues, fulfillment, shipping. So we're going to do a very DePIN-centric launchpad, which gives people access to tokens via things like airdrops, which in turn funds the projects at an early stage. Also giving people early access to the miners, so to the actual equipment and hardware, which ensures that if these get in the hands of the right people, people like Daniel and Max, who actually have reach and actually are willing to get their hands dirty to make a bit of extra money, this will ensure that there's an effective, fast rollout and that these projects reach scale really quickly so they can actually compete with like the Vodafones of the world and the Googles of the world, right? So that's what we're trying to do. And we do so via gamifying the whole process. So basically, how to motivate people to be a good DePIN citizen, right? So there's different ways that you can farm points and build your reputation. You earn our token, which we'll soon be releasing, called Spotty. And with that Spotty token, you can unlock access to miners, to airdrops, to all kinds of other things. In turn, we build the exact type of customer profile or user profile that these projects need to actually grow and to actually scale. So it creates a very virtuous cycle between projects finding the right initial user personas to actually help build and grow the network, to in turn ensure that there's a service to actually sell in the real world for real dollars or euros, which should feed back into the price of the token and reward these people for their work. So that's what we're doing. And that's about it. So thank you guys for listening. I didn't pass out. I'm really happy. Oh, sorry. No, you can't clap yet because there has to be a cool thing at the end. Boom. So this is Abraham Lincoln with drones. This is more Daniel's. This is more Daniel's work. But yeah, so coming back to volatility, and I had a mentor tell me that crypto seems a lot like gambling, right? There seems to be a lot of luck involved. But what he told me was luck is when opportunity meets preparation. So the idea is to be prepared, and the idea is to build a bit of your own luck. And I think the best way to do that and to predict what's going to happen in the future is to help create it, right? So hopefully you guys all get involved. Come to DePINHub.io, and we'll see you in the future. Let's build this rocket ship together. Cool.
Okay, hi everyone. Can I get a show of hands? How many people in this audience are technical? Do you consider yourselves technical? Excellent. If I trip up, let me know. How many of you feel like you are familiar with what DePIN is? Good, okay. Again, if I trip up, let me know. I'm going to make two commitments. One, I'm going to try to keep this really short because I'm sure everybody just wants to go out and get another beer. Second, I'm going to try to do this without using jargon. So give me feedback after the presentation. And I've been clicking through as we've gone, so you've now had a sneak peek. Starting properly. So I don't think this is going to surprise anyone. We live in an era with massively expanding range of data sources. So the ever-increasing number of apps on your phone, on your computer, are now interacting with an ever-increasing number of data sources. It started with things like blockchain, Bitcoin back in 2009. Ethereum was the 9th, I think, blockchain, and that was about 2015. Now we have, according to ChatGPT, over 3,000 blockchains that are currently in existence. Add to that ChatGPT and AI itself, the emergence of open AI models of all sorts. ChatGPT estimates that that's about tens of thousands now. And then you've got some of these open source databases that are starting to get traction. You've got ActivityPub that's now actually powering threads with Meta and other people. So the goal of POKT Network is to enable you to enjoy the wonder of this ever-expanding universe of data sources without having to build an ever-expanding universe of infrastructure. And we do that by providing a shared infrastructure layer that people can build upon to build products and services that then enable developers to build some of these wonderful applications that then can both that can kind of communicate and collaborate with all of these data sources. So they can send requests, something can happen on the other end, a process can be run within that data source, and then a response can be returned. Right now we do that for over 60 blockchains. We've already made changes to the protocol to enable applications to interact with open LLMs. And we actually have 4 live R&D projects looking at those kind of expanded use cases at the moment. And because of the way that we're structured, we're able to do that with unstoppable uptime. So the protocol hasn't gone down. In Web 2, you talk about 5 nines, I think 99.999% uptime at a protocol, because we've got the natural resilience of a naturally diverse ecosystem, all with different system setups. 66% of our operators run on what they call bare metal. We have 15,000 nodes deployed across 22 countries, which means that we can scale up and down around demand in a way that's very hard for a centralized company to do. And we can do that with really effective cost base. So we have very lean costs, which then enables this ecosystem on top of us. So to give you something to compare that to, some of the companies that we benchmark to that are now using us for their back-end infra would go and resell at somewhere around 450 per mil and up. And it's all based on this concept of a sharing economy. So DePIN didn't invent it, Web3 didn't invent it. I think, honestly, Uber, Airbnb started that. This idea of empowering people to become your supply side, to actually deliver your services. And that, within our world, is through shared compute. So you can, sorry, I failed, there's jargon. I'm trying really hard. You can kind of install a program basically onto your devices at home. Maybe you get a specialist device, maybe you do it on your laptop. And that enables people to access these data sources through you. And kind of coming back to some of the stuff that Mike was saying, instead of having these monoliths that typically own these large bits of infrastructure that then create a huge barrier to entry, because if you want to come in, you've got to build it all yourself as well. And then you've got to build the products and services on top of it. And we end up with a handful of people building and owning our digital future. If we share the infrastructure there, you can then provide access, because the other thing that's awesome about protocols is not just this decentralized supply side that we're able to enable, it's this decentralized demand side that we can also then allow to build on top of it. So for POKT Network, actually for a very long time we only had one access point. In, I think it was October of last year, we formally launched our second. They open sourced their kit so that the next one was easier. This week, tomorrow in fact, we'll get first relays from our third gateway. We announced another 3 just recently with 2 massive developer communities now building products and services on top of our infra. And also one of the most respected RPC providers now sending their requests directly through POKT Network. But in H2, when we launch our Shannon upgrade, there are 2 really interesting things that become possible. So A, it becomes much easier to join our supply side, and B, creating your business on top of our infrastructure becomes permissionless. And we're not your average Web3 project. So we are not a meme coin. We actually make money. So we implemented revenue actually only last year. So we have been learning a lot through the bear and changing a lot of things. So we are not the same company coming into what is hopefully a bull cycle. as we were the last time round. We also are genuinely decentralized at the governance level, so we are governed by members, one person, one vote. We have zero governance whales, no matter how many tokens you hold. We've got a really good growth strategy around this kind of, we call them gateways, so businesses that build on top of our infrastructure are called gateways, or who outsource some of their infra to us. And we've been told by some of those that actually at our price point, it makes, unless they have some cost in their own infra, they want to send everything through it. So there's this idea that actually this 1,000 flowers blooming, instead of having 3 big monoliths that control everything, you could have 1,000 Ubers. So it's what Uber could never do because they control the whole way through. We're opening that up so anybody can build their products and services on top. And that seems to be working very well. We'll start to see relays, I guess, over the next couple of months. By H2 is when it should hit an inflection point. And then since the last cycle, we also learned a huge amount about our tokenomics. So our inflation is now less than 5%, whereas it was problematic before it was too high. And we actually have a path to deflation, and we're going to be sharing more on that. So that's who we are. Do give me feedback after this session, because we're working on our narratives right now. And yeah, nice to meet you.
Okay, guys. Last presentation. Thanks, Adrian, for the presentation on POKT. That was awesome. I just spilled some water on my glass. I haven't wet myself. Extremely embarrassing. I don't really know how to cover that up, so I thought I'd just admit it. Right, quick introductions myself. My name is Mark Little. I'm the CMO and BD lead for Streamr Network. And a bit of background on Streamr. So there was an ICO in 2017. Some of you may have heard the name. It's kind of the top 500 project. It's been around for 6 years or so. It's a really important time for the project because 3 or 4 weeks ago, we launched mainnet. And so the project's kind of transitioning from build phase to all about protocol adoption, which I'll talk more about in a moment. So what is Streamr? Michael actually touched on this. The best meme and analogy for Streamr is kind of BitTorrent for real-time data delivery. So it's not exactly the same from a technology perspective, but it's pretty close. It's pretty nuanced, the kind of difference. But bullet point number 2 is the key thing to understand. So Streamr, first and foremost, is a P2P mesh network for real-time data delivery. So think of it as lots of data pipelines, either one-to-many or many-to-many, for real-time data delivery. And I put on there, it's not a blockchain, because I always get the question, what does your blockchain do? We don't have a blockchain. We use blockchain technology to enable this P2P mesh network, okay? So for the developers in the room, the pattern of the data is something called publish-subscribe. This is a extremely well-used tool in Web 2 world, and there are many, many use cases. And it's kind of a fire and forget way of sending data. So the publisher sends a topic or a stream, they fire it out, and then subscribers subscribe to the stream and get it on the other end. And the last point, which is really key, is that it is serverless. So you might be sitting there thinking, well, of course it's serverless, it's decentralized. But actually, when I'm talking about Streamr, there's always that penny drop moment. And the thing about Web3 is there's this kind of expression that we're all on this journey to decentralization. Most Web3 projects are using centralized servers for real-time data delivery and real-time and data storage. But now with projects like Streamr, of course, you can do everything in a decentralized manner, which is super important. Okay, so that's a bit about Streamr. What do we use blockchain for? So I'm going to try and explain the tokenomics as simply as I can, but essentially there's 2 sides to the protocol and the network. There's the demand side and the supply side. Okay, so the demand side, a publisher will come in and sponsor streams. So how do they do that? Well, they put the native token of Streamr, which is called the data token, they put it into a smart contract. And on the other side, the supply side, the people, the community, the node runners, the peers that are supplying compute power to relay the data. They do that through their nodes. And so they honor the sponsorship contract and they earn APY in the process. Okay, so essentially, in Web 2 world, with publish subscribe, we've got lots of centralized companies that are offering pub sub services. So the big guys, AWS, Azure, Google, etc., and more niche pub sub companies as well. All of that is now replaced by a system of smart contracts. So it's pretty smart in that manner, in that it's now fully working through the tokenomics, and it's permissionless, of course. There's other things that we use blockchain and cryptography for: access control, data verification, which is increasingly important and will be going forwards, and all of that kind of ladders up to the security of EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine. Okay. Now, this is the bit that I think starts to get interesting. So let's talk a bit more about how the network actually works. So the first point to mention is that, you know, we're the core team of Streamr. We built the protocol, we built the community, but when people come and publish via the Streamr network, the projects, it's their P2P network. It's not our P2P network. It's permissionless by design. And that's a really important point to start with. How specifically does it work? Okay, so the first node is what's called the publisher node. Okay, so at the moment we're streaming from that camera, and that camera is connected to my colleague's laptop, Lasse's laptop, and Lasse's laptop is in effect the publisher node. Okay, and what it's doing is sending the video stream, me presenting now, to these subscriber nodes around the world. And these subscriber nodes might be anyone that's watching this live stream. So if you go to this URL now on your mobile phones and open up DePINDrinks.streamer.space, it'll take a little bit of time to load because this is an MVP and there's lots of people in this room, there's Wi-Fi, but it will load. And you'll get real-time data streaming of me presenting right now. And the clever part is that your browser tab on your mobile phones then also becomes subscriber nodes within the P2P network. So all of you in this room then join the P2P network along with these people listening to this live stream around the world. Now then, what happens next, more people start to join the network, and you start to get this kind of mesh pattern. So this is the Streamr P2P network based on about 30 nodes. And what you can see is this kind of mesh pattern which is formed, and that's basically derived from the underlying algorithm of the protocol and something called DHT, which is distributed hash table. And those two things decide where the data is going next, to which node. And each node is sending on to the next 4 nodes, and those 4 nodes are sending on to the next 4 nodes. And so you can see how it starts to grow exponentially very, very quickly. In fact, what that means is that the network hyperscales. So in P2P networks, hyperscaling is super important because there's a ton of benefits that come with that, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then finally, when you've got 5,000 nodes, it looks like this kind of spaghetti mess. But this is a real-life screen grab of our testnet Explorer from last year. And we were doing various tests in terms of latency and delivery. But to give you an idea, like, what are the DePINs that we work with, because we're DePIN infrastructure, we support DePIN projects. One of the projects we work closely with is called Demo, which you may have heard of. Michael, I think, mentioned it in his presentation. Kind of poster child of the DePIN narrative for this bull run. So they've got about 10,000 miners in cars. Like, I have one in my cars. I drive around Lisbon, I earn Demo tokens. And the data from my car is firing back via the Streamr network, as is the other 10,000 Demo relays in cars around the world. And we're about to map it on our mainnet network Explorer, which we're just building. It's going to look exactly like this, essentially. So that's pretty cool. Now then, everything I've talked about so far in this kind of P2P model is essentially free to use, which is quite incredible and mind-blowing when you think about it, because companies that are using centralized servers are paying a fortune for real-time data delivery. So then, what is the role of operator nodes? I talked about in the tokenomics on the second slide. So in certain use cases, you might want to boost and support the P2P network with paid-for sponsorship contracts or operator nodes. So for example, say you're video streaming and we know that we have a ton of viewers that are going to dial in from America, we might pay for some operator nodes to be in that region, and it sort of supports and boosts the connectivity and reduces the latency in that specific region. So it's quite important for certain use cases, certain commercial applications. Okay, hope all of that makes sense. So what's the benefits of all of this kind of P2P way of delivering data in real time versus, say, a centralized server? Well, there's a number of them. First of all, we help Web3 projects truly decentralize. So as I mentioned, we're all on this kind of journey to decentralization. And there's a bit of a soft benefit to that, which is kind of ideological. So if you speak to some of the demo core team, they'll say we love building on Streamr because it means we don't have to use centralized servers. So it's kind of like a soft benefit, but what comes with that is kind of lower maintenance. So if you're working with high payload data streaming, you have to start working with things like turn servers, and it is frankly a pain in the backside from the DevOps perspective. So there's a huge benefit there. No single point of failure, and there's various benefits underneath that. Such as you can't have DDoS attacks and that sort of thing. The thing that really gets me excited is this hyperscaling benefit. Okay. So let me try and explain this chart. So this is from our testnet, and what this says on the x-axis is 2,000 nodes, and on the y-axis is message propagation delay in milliseconds. So this goes from 140 milliseconds for delivery of the data to 190 milliseconds. And you can see as the number of nodes increases, you kind of get this inverse parabola. And what that means is that every marginal peer that joins, you get decreasing amounts of data delivery time. I hope that makes sense. Now, if you compare that to a centralized server, it's more linear. So when you speak to video streaming companies, for example, about final mile delivery, they get very excited about this. And the reason is, if the number of viewers for them doubles from, say, 1,000 to 2,000, their server costs almost double. So these massive live streaming platforms are spending a fortune on CDNs, content delivery networks. When we start speaking to them about Streamr, they get very excited because that cost leaves their P&L, right? And this, for me, is really exciting because you start thinking about decentralized Web3 infrastructure protocols and the use case around it, it's potentially really powerful. Okay, so that's the very complicated stuff over with. Quickly on use cases, PubSub is used everywhere, places you probably wouldn't imagine. Obviously, I've talked about DePIN quite a bit in IoT connectivity. Messaging and notifications. Anytime you get a notification from an app, typically it's done via PubSub, and messenger applications are quite often built using PubSub technologies. We've in fact built a decentralized chat app just for fun. It's at the chat.app, and to access it, you have to have an Ethereum wallet address. So we're now thinking about how do we bring that to market? How do we work with other partners in Web3 to scale that? Video streaming, I've talked a lot about AI. There's a ton of use cases around PubSub and AI. If you start thinking about inference, about training AI models in real time, then there's tons around that. Network metrics and coordination. This is an interesting one. So we work with a lot of DePINs now, and the first conversation we start having is how Streamr can help in terms of analyzing how their network is performing, their network of nodes, but more importantly, how to coordinate their nodes. So if you've got a blockchain that's doing consensus algorithms, or even a network, a P2P network like Streamr that's relaying data, the nodes have to speak to each other to understand which node did what and when. At the moment, most Web3 projects are using centralized ledgers or data storage in order to do that. So we've got a big role to play there, and we're building solutions for that with a number of DePINs at the moment. Data monetization, we have a whole framework around that. That's a conversation for another day. There's a whole presentation around that probably. Okay, a bit about ecosystem. It's the logo charts. Demo, we talked about Arcream. They're doing decentralized renewable energy. We're working with them in the same way that we work with Demo. So anytime you want to send data in real time, up, down, or through a DePIN stack, you come to Streamr. Ator, privacy-based DePIN, super hyped at the moment in this narrative. We just started working with them. Thanks to a nice introduction from the Hotspotty guys, thanks. We are talking to them about node coordination, network analytics. We're talking about privacy-based video streaming and messenger apps. So not only can we help them, but they can help us in making our messaging and broadcasting applications more private. IoTex we work a lot with. Actually, we've got a sort of sister project called WebStream. We built like a ZK-proof privacy-based project which is about protecting the data of car drivers for auto insurance purposes. There's been a bit of the press recently about insurance companies in America misusing and profiling individuals and giving them dodgy insurance premiums. We built a ZK-proof-based system that overcomes that challenge. Minima, you may not have heard of, they started in the IoT space, they're DePIN now. They're doing blockchain light nodes. They can run their entire blockchain at the edge in automotive devices. So we're doing live streaming from sports cars and tracking all the performance data of it. We've got a race coming up with Hyundai. We're building a project around that. We're also working with other automotive companies with those guys. Redstone isn't a DePIN, but I thought I'd mention it because they use Streamr a lot. Redstone's like Oracle, it's like Chainlink Oracle, but much, much quicker. And they do Oracle data transmission in real time because they use Streamr. Cool. Right. This one gets me excited. So, protocol adoption. Everything I've just talked about is Web3 data, which is all well and good, and we are a DePIN. We started life in Web3, we're all about decentralization, but the reality is the amount of data that comes from Web3 via the Streamr network is still limited, and it will be for the next X years. For us to really get a lot of data going through the Streamr network, we're now talking very seriously and thinking about how do we go and get Web2 data into Streamr network. And Adrienne touched on it in her presentation, but they think about gateway businesses built on top of the protocol and the network, and we're now doing the same. So the reason we do that is because if you go and speak to a Web2 CTO about smart contracts, first of all, he falls asleep. And second of all, he's like, I don't have the resource to learn how to do this. The second thing is token volatility. You know, the price of our native token goes up and down by 10% every week. So you can't budget for it, you can't go to a CFO, you can't deal with that, with fiat money. There's all these friction points. And the other thing is SLAs. So we're starting to build businesses on top. This is the first business that we're bringing to market, and it's called Subcast. And as the homepage suggests, it's P2P video broadcasting for last mile delivery. And if you remember the chart I was presenting earlier, with the kind of inverse parabola that was explaining hyperscaling and the benefits of that from a cost perspective and a latency perspective, when we start speaking to video infrastructure companies about this, they get very, very excited. And there's a penny drop unique moment for those guys. So we're pretty excited about this. The reason I'm showing this is because it's important for the Streamr community because they want to see more data through the network. So this is like a key strategy for us. And then we've got a list of other businesses we want to build as well. But if there are any builders, entrepreneurs in the room who want to come and build pub/sub-based businesses on top of Streamr network, then come and speak to me at the end. And we will help you do that. Okay, that was Streamr in 10 charts, 15 minutes. I'm done. We need someone to wrap up. Shall I do a wrap up? I think that's it, guys.
Why not?
I think you should do it. Oh yeah, Peaq, sorry.
Yeah, so we have a sponsor, and he's trying to skip our sponsor. We treat our sponsors very well. So we're going to show a really quick, Mark, if you can set it up, because I actually don't know what you did with it. A real quick video. So before he plays this video, so is it like, I'm going to give another 30-minute speech now. No, I'm just kidding. Because I can talk. There's a blockchain called Peaq. So as you know, like a layer 1 would be like Ethereum, Bitcoin, like you name it. Like that's the OG infrastructure of crypto, right? Now they're building layer 1, so blockchains that are actually built just for DePIN. So they're actually built for real world applications and to build like real stuff on them. Peaq is one of those. They're one of the arguably 3 that exist right now in the world. They're based in Germany, but some of their teams actually here in Portugal. They couldn't be here today because they're about to launch their token and be on mainnet, so it's actually pretty exciting. They threw a big party in Dubai. We were there last week. There's a lot of hype around them. They sponsored the event, so all the pizza, which is going to be there in a moment, and drinks and stuff, everything was from them. And so this is just a quick, like 1 minute video about kind of what they do, and then I'm just going to read something real quick about an event that they threw, and then we're done. So, go ahead. Oh, there's no sound. There was like this very like sexy background music that Pedro made, but oh, there it is. Yeah. I think that's more or less it. Now it's just funky music. But yeah, so basically what they were going to come here, but unfortunately one of their guys is down in the Algarve and the other one's so busy with their token launch that I don't think he could make it. So I'm going to read on their behalf, which I think we should do since they sponsored the event. So Peaq for DePIN and Machine RWA, which is real world assets. So this is basically like tokenizing real world stuff. Together presented the world's first tokenized robo-cafe at the Token 2049 event in Dubai last week. So it was basically a cafe where everything was served by robots. And all these robots were running on the Peaq blockchain, right? So powered by a company called Ex Machina, which is a project on Peaq. It says here, the autonomous robot tokenization platform in collaboration with eLoop Network, Machine RWA, yes, the cafe, okay, the grammar here is a bit strange, but the cafe served coffee and ice cream to all the visitors, sharing the revenue from every cup between demo token holders. So the demo comes ahead of Peaq's mainnet launch, slated for the coming weeks, showcases the network's versatility as a backbone for any real-world use case, tapping smart machines to create value. Positioning itself as the home of DePIN, Peaq powers a vibrant and diverse ecosystem, including more than 25 DePIN projects across 10 different industries, with more than 300,000 machines, robots, devices across those industries. Even before their mainnet launch, Peaq has established itself as the second largest DePIN ecosystem across all of Web3. So next event, next month, hopefully we'll have some guys from Peaq here so you can talk to them as well. If anybody wants to build a project, like build your own DePIN, that's a really good way to start. They have the underlying infrastructure. So cool, thank you guys very much. Pizza and drinks outside.